My father's face, projected onto the large screen at my wedding reception, was a masterpiece of crumbling arrogance. It was a live feed, a news report from across town, and the camera had caught him mid-toast. He held a champagne flute aloft, his mouth open, ready to celebrate his precious daughter, my sister, Chloe. But the words never came. Instead, his eyes, magnified by the high-definition camera, darted from side to side. Confusion was the first wave. It was a subtle shift, a slight furrowing of his brow, like a man trying to place a familiar but unwelcome sound. Then came the dawning horror. His jaw went slack. The champagne flute tilted, spilling a golden stream down the lapel of his ridiculously expensive tuxedo. He didn't notice. His skin, usually ruddy with self-satisfaction and good scotch, turned the color of old parchment. For the first time in my entire life, watching my father's world disintegrate in real time on a 60-inch television, I smiled. It was a real smile, not the tight, polite one I had perfected over 28 years of being the other daughter. This one was wide and genuine and deeply, deeply satisfying. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand the sublime beauty of that moment, to truly appreciate the symphony of my father's ruin, you have to understand the years of quiet sheet music that came before it. You have to start from the beginning. I am sitting here now in the sunroom of a house that I, myself, brought back from the brink of collapse. The morning light is filtering through the original leaded glass windows, panes I spent a month painstakingly cleaning and resetting. My husband, Mark, just brought me a cup of coffee, kissing the top of my head before heading out to his workshop in the restored carriage house. It's our 5th wedding anniversary. A letter arrived this morning, forwarded from my lawyer's office. It's from my father, postmarked from a town I've never heard of or heard. It's the 5th one he sent. It will join the other 4 unopened in a box in the attic. Seeing his familiar, aggressive handwriting is what made me think back to it all. To the day it all began, and the day it all ended. Growing up, my family was a perfect little solar system. My father, Richard, was the sun. Everything and everyone revolved around him. His moods dictated the weather in our home. His business successes were family triumphs. His frustrations were family crises. My mother was a planet held in a tight, predictable orbit, her primary function to reflect his light and absorb his gravitational temper. And then there was Chloe. Chloe was Jupiter, the bright, gaseous giant adored for her beautiful storms and her sheer, unignorable presence. She was 2 years older than me, and from the moment she was born, she was the designated star. She had the blonde hair, the easy laugh, the effortless charm that made people forgive her for anything. And I suppose I was Earth, dependable, solid. Quietly sustaining life while everyone else was looking at the flashier planets. I was the one who remembered birthdays, who made sure my father's dry cleaning was picked up, who did Chloe's calculus homework so she could go to a party. My role was to be the stagehand for the grand performance of my family's life. I was not bitter about it. Not then. It was simply the physics of our universe. Chloe was the artist, the creative, the one with potential. I was the practical one, the steady one. Thank goodness we have Anna, my mother would say with a sigh, as if I were a sturdy appliance. So reliable. My father's business was construction. He built soulless McMansions in sprawling suburbs, each one a monument to beige carpets and questionable taste. He was successful, and he never let anyone forget it. From the time I was 16, I worked in his office. It was expected. You'll learn the value of $1, he'd say, which was ironic since he barely paid me one. I started by filing, then moved to bookkeeping, then to managing project accounts. I was good at it. I was meticulous, organized. I found a strange satisfaction in making the columns add up, in creating order out of the chaos of receipts and invoices. Chloe, meanwhile, flitted from one passion to the next, all funded by my father. First it was fashion design school, which she dropped out of after a semester because the sewing machines were too noisy. Then it was a photography course, which ended when she decided carrying the camera was too heavy. Then finally, she landed on becoming a lifestyle influencer. This one stuck, mostly because it required no actual skill beyond taking pictures of herself with expensive products my father bought for her. I was the one behind the scenes, managing the spreadsheets for her brand, tracking the affiliate links that brought in pennies, while my father poured in thousands to maintain the illusion of her success. I didn't complain. It was my job. I was reliable, Anna. My own passion was a quiet one. I loved old things. I loved the smell of old books, the feel of worn wood, the history whispered by a piece of furniture that had lived a dozen lives before me. I spent my weekends at flea markets and antique shops, using the pittance I earned to buy broken chairs and tarnished silver. I taught myself how to restore them, how to strip away layers of ugly paint to find the beautiful grain beneath, how to mend a broken leg, polish away the tarnish, and make something forgotten beautiful again. My family found it baffling. "Why are you wasting your time with that junk?" Chloe would ask, wrinkling her nose as I carefully glued a piece of veneer back onto a 19th century writing desk. "There's no money in it," my father would declare, as if that were the only measure of worth. It was during one of my flea market excursions that I met Mark. He was a high school history teacher, and he was there looking for old maps for his classroom. He didn't see junk. He saw what I saw. He saw the story. He was kind and steady, and he had the calmest eyes I had ever seen. He listened to me. He asked questions about my restoration work, his face lit with genuine interest. He was everything my family was not. He was quiet and humble, and his value was not measured in dollars, but in the respect of his students and the love of his family. When I brought him home to meet my parents, it was a disaster. My father grilled him like a hostile witness in a corporate lawsuit. "A teacher, huh? Don't make much, do you?" he asked, swirling his brandy. "I make enough," Mark replied calmly, not rising to the bait. Chloe was worse. She looked Mark up and down, her gaze lingering on his department store shirt and his sensible shoes. "Oh, Anna," she said later, in a stage whisper loud enough for the whole house to hear. "He's so plain." They didn't get it. They couldn't. Mark's worth wasn't something you could display on Instagram, but I loved him. I loved him for his plainness, for his steadiness. He was the solid ground beneath my feet in a family built on shifting sands. After 2 years, he proposed. He did it in our small apartment surrounded by my restored furniture. He didn't have a diamond the size of a pigeon's egg. He had a simple, beautiful vintage ring from the 1920s, one he knew I would adore. I said yes before he even finished asking. I was happy. Genuinely, truly happy. And that, I think, is what they couldn't stand. The inciting incident, the moment the first crack appeared in the foundation of my life, happened over dinner. It was a Sunday, the mandatory family meal at my parents' house. The air was thick with the usual tension, my father holding court about a new land deal, my mother nodding along, Chloe scrolling through her phone, occasionally sighing dramatically for attention. Mark and I waited for a lull in the monologue. "We have some exciting news," I said, my voice sounding small in the cavernous dining room. My father paused, annoyed at the interruption. "Mark and I are getting married," I announced, holding up my hand to show the ring. My mother made the appropriate cooing sounds. "Oh, Anna, that's lovely." My father grunted. "About time." "How much did that set you back, son?" he asked, squinting at the ring. Mark just smiled. It was the right price. Chloe, however, put down her phone. A strange look crossed her face. It wasn't happiness, it was calculation. "We've set a date," I continued, feeling a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. "The second Saturday in June, June 14th. Silence. My father put down his fork. My mother's smile froze. Chloe looked up, her eyes wide with manufactured disbelief. "June 14th, she gasped. "You can't be serious, Anna." I blinked. "Why not? It's a beautiful time of year." "That's the day of my brand launch party," she declared, as if announcing a national holiday. "You know this. I've been talking about it for months." I had, in fact, not known this. Chloe talked about her brand constantly. Specific dates were rarely mentioned amidst the general cloud of self-promotion. "Oh, Chloe, I didn't realize you'd set a firm date," I said. "Well, I have," she snapped. "It's the most important day of my career. I have investors coming, press, other influencers. Everything is booked. The venue, the caterer, the celebrity DJ." My father turned to me, his face darkening. "Well, you'll have to move your wedding, Anna." It wasn't a question. It was an order. I stared at him, stunned. Move it? We've already put down deposits, the church, the reception hall. "Deposits can be moved," he said dismissively. "This is your sister's career on the line. A wedding is just a party. This is business." "It's not just a party to me," I said, my voice trembling. "It's the most important day of my life." Chloe let out a scoff. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. You're having, 50 people in a church hall? I'm having 200 at the Museum of Modern Art. It's a little different in scale." The cruelty of it stole my breath. She had just reduced my marriage, my love for Mark, my entire future, to a head count. I looked at my mother, pleading. She just wrung her hands. "Anna, dear, maybe you could just look at July. Chloe has worked so hard." Worked hard? I thought, a flash of hot rage cutting through the shock. I was the one who built her website. I was the one who managed her finances. I was the one who spent hours listening to her prattle on about fonts and filters. She hadn't worked a hard day in her coddled life. "No," I said, the word feeling foreign and powerful in my mouth. "We're not moving the date." My father's eyes narrowed to slits. "What did you say?" "We're not moving the date," I repeated, Mark's hand finding mine under the table, his grip firm and steadying. "Our date is June 14th. I'm sorry it clashes with your party, Chloe. It's an unfortunate coincidence." "Unfortunate?" Chloe shrieked. "You did this on purpose. You've always been jealous of me." "That's enough," my father boomed, slamming his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. He pointed a finger at me. "You're being selfish and unreasonable. Your sister's future is at stake, and you're worried about a little party. You will change the date, or you can forget about us being there." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He expected me to crumble. He expected reliable, dependable Anna to do what she always did, give in. But something inside me had snapped. The years of being overlooked, of being the backstage crew for their lives, had finally broken. "That's your choice to make," I said, my voice miraculously calm. "Our wedding is on June 14th. I stood up, Mark rising with me. "Thank you for dinner. We should be going." We walked out of that house, leaving behind a stunned silence. The drive home was quiet. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a deep, aching pain. My own family, my parents, my sister, they had just asked me to choose, and they had made it clear which choice they preferred. When we got back to our apartment, I finally broke down. I sobbed in Mark's arms, not for the wedding, but for the sheer, callous disregard, for the final, undeniable proof that I was and always had been secondary. He just held me, murmuring words of comfort, letting me cry it all out. After the tears subsided, something else took their place. It was a cold, hard resolve. It settled deep in my bones, a feeling as solid and unyielding as granite. They had drawn a line in the sand. Fine, I would let them have their line, and then I would erase it, along with everything else they held dear, because they had made a fatal miscalculation. They thought I was just reliable Anna, the quiet bookkeeper. They had forgotten what I'd been doing for the last 12 years. I hadn't just been balancing their books. I had been reading them. That night, I didn't sleep. I went to the antique writing desk I had so lovingly restored, the one Chloe had called junk. I unlocked a hidden drawer, one I had discovered and repaired myself. Inside was a hard drive, a very small, very unassuming hard drive. my trump card. It had started about 2 years prior. I was doing a deep dive into the company's year-end financials, preparing for the accountants. I found an invoice that seemed off. It was from a supplier called Apex Development for a huge quantity of high-grade lumber. But the project number it was coded to was for a development that used exclusively steel frame construction. It was a small thing, a detail most would overlook, but I was meticulous. It was my nature. I cross-referenced the Apex Development address. It was a P.O. box in a state we didn't even operate in. I dug deeper. Late at night, in the office, long after everyone had gone home, I started pulling old files. I went through years of invoices, of project ledgers, of bank transfers, and I found it. A second set of books. It was ingenious in its audacity. My father had created a network of shell corporations, Apex Development, Summit Materials, Pinnacle Holdings, all with grand, soaring names, and all of them nothing more than mailboxes and phantom websites. He was invoicing his own company for materials that were never delivered. Millions of dollars siphoned off the top, laundered through these fake companies, and deposited into offshore accounts. He was committing massive, multi-million-dollar tax fraud and embezzling from his own business partners, who owned a 30% stake in the company. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I remember sitting in the dark office, the glow of the monitor on my face, feeling nauseous. This was my father, the man who lectured me on the value of $1. My first instinct was to delete it all, to pretend I never saw it, to protect him. But then I thought about his business partners, good men with families who trusted him completely. I thought about the way he treated people, the way he treated me, the arrogance, the dismissal, the constant reminders of my supposed inferiority. So I didn't delete it. I copied it. Every false invoice, every fraudulent bank statement, every email creating another shell corporation. I downloaded it all onto that encrypted, password-protected hard drive, and I waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I knew that knowledge was a form of power my father had never credited me with. He saw my bookkeeping skills as secretarial, not strategic. He was about to learn the difference. The day after the disastrous dinner, I called my grandmother. My mother's mother was the antithesis of my family. She was a retired accountant, sharp as a tack at 82, and had a backbone of pure Pennsylvania steel. She had long disapproved of my father's flashy arrogance. I met her at her small, tidy house. I brought the hard drive. I told her everything. The wedding, the ultimatum, Chloe's party. She just nodded, her lips a thin, grim line. Then I told her what was on the hard drive. I plugged it into her old desktop computer and walked her through the files. She was silent for a long time, her sharp eyes scanning the columns of figures, the web of deceit I had uncovered. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me. There was no shock on her face, just a grim, weary confirmation. I never liked him, she said simply, always smelled of cheap cologne and expensive lies. She looked at me, her eyes clear and fierce. What do you want to do, Anna? I don't know, I admitted. If I go to the authorities, he'll go to prison. He's my father. He stopped being your father when he decided a party for your sister was more important than your wedding, she said, her voice devoid of sympathy. He made his choice. Now you make yours. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she leaned forward, a strategic glint in her eye. The old accountant in her was coming online. Confronting him now is a mistake, she said. He's a cornered animal. He'll lash out, destroy the evidence, hide the money so deep we'll never find it. He'll paint you as a bitter, hysterical daughter. So what do we do? I asked. Nothing, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. You do absolutely nothing. You let him think he's won. You play the part of the heartbroken, defeated daughter. You let him and your sister get so comfortable in their victory, so blinded by their own arrogance that they don't see the trap closing until it's too late. It was a cold-blooded strategy. It was ruthless. It was perfect. They want to humiliate you on your wedding day, my grandmother continued, her voice like ice. So we will let them. We will turn their stage into our own. We will let them gather the audience for us. And so the plan was born. My grandmother, it turned out, had friends in all the right and all the wrong places. Her bridge partner's son was a forensic accountant. Her former neighbor was an investigative journalist for a major news network, a man with a reputation for taking down corporate titans. "He owes me a favor," my grandmother said with a shrug. "I handled his mother's estate pro bono." The next few months were a masterclass in deception. The first step was securing my own small finances. With my grandmother's help, I set up a trust that was legally untouchable. I moved my savings, the money I'd made from selling my restored furniture, into it. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then we met with the journalist, David. He was a serious man with tired eyes that lit up when he saw the evidence. He spent a week verifying everything, using his own sources to confirm the offshore accounts and the fake corporations. "This is dynamite," he said, handing the hard drive back to me. "This is a primetime special report. We can ruin him." "I don't just want to ruin him," I said quietly. "I want it to be public. I want it to happen on a specific day, at a specific time." I told him the date, June 14th. A flicker of understanding and perhaps pity crossed his face. "You want it to air during your wedding?" "No," I corrected him. "I want it to air during my sister's party. I just happen to be getting married at the same time." He agreed. The story was too good to pass up. The human interest angle of the family betrayal made it irresistible. They would frame it as a special investigation into corporate corruption, scheduled to air at 7:30 p.m., right in the middle of both our events. The hardest part was playing the victim. I had to endure weeks of my family's smug satisfaction. My mother would call, her voice dripping with pity. "Anna, are you sure you won't reconsider? Your father is just so disappointed in your stubbornness. It's casting such a pall over Chloe's big day." I learned to make my voice crack. I learned to sound like I was on the verge of tears. "I just can't, Mom," I'd whisper. "The deposits are non-refundable." Chloe was insufferable. She would text me pictures of her dress fittings, of the floral arrangements, of the gold leaf invitations. "Thinking of you, so sad you'll be missing this," she'd write, the faux sympathy oozing from every word. I would reply with a simple, sad face emoji. They were telling everyone in their social circle that I was being difficult and jealous, that I had thrown a childish tantrum and was trying to ruin Chloe's big moment. They were trying to isolate me, to make me the villain of the story, and I let them. Mark was my rock. He was in on the entire plan, my co-conspirator in justice. He held me when the act became too much, when the pain of their cruelty felt real despite the plan. "Not much longer," he would say, stroking my hair. "They're building their own scaffold, Annie. You just have to let them finish it." My father tried a different tactic. He tried to use money and power. He called the church and tried to persuade them there had been a scheduling error. The kindly old priest, a friend of Mark's family, told him politely that there was no error. He called our caterer, a small, family-run business, and offered them double to cancel on us and cater a last-minute overflow party for Chloe. The owner, a woman whose integrity was worth more than my father's money, told him her word was her bond and hung up on him. She then called me to let me know what he had tried to do. Every act of their arrogance, every cruel whisper, every attempt to sabotage us, I documented. It was all just more fuel for the fire. They truly believed they had me beaten. In their minds, I was going to have a pathetic little wedding with a handful of guests, crying in a corner while the real celebration, the important one, happened across town. They saw me as a casualty of their ambition, a small, sad footnote in the glorious story of Chloe's success. They had no idea that they were the footnote. The morning of June 14th arrived, bright and impossibly beautiful. I woke up feeling preternaturally calm. The anxiety and the hurt that had been my constant companions for months were gone, replaced by a serene, icy sense of purpose. Today was the day. Mark and I had a quiet breakfast. He reached across the table and took my hand. "Ready?" he asked. I squeezed his hand. "More than ready." My wedding was never meant to be a grand affair. It was exactly what we wanted, small, intimate, and meaningful. We had 50 guests, Mark's warm, loving family, my grandmother looking regal in a lavender suit, a handful of my true friends, the ones who had listened to my heartbroken act and offered unwavering support, never once judging me, the ones who knew my family and weren't surprised by their absence. I wore a simple, elegant dress, not a designer gown, but a vintage 1940s satin dress that I had found in a thrift store and restored myself. It fit me like a glove. As I got ready, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "I hope you have a nice day, dear. We're all thinking of you. Chloe looks like a princess. I wish you could see her." The manipulation was so reflexive, so pathetic, that I almost laughed. I didn't reply. The ceremony was perfect. Standing at the altar in the sun-drenched church, looking at Mark's honest, loving face, I felt a wave of pure happiness that had nothing to do with the coming storm. This was real. He was real. Our love was real. Everything else was just noise. The reception was held in a beautifully restored historic inn. In the corner of the room was a large television screen. We had told our guests it was for a slideshow of photos of Mark and me growing up. No one thought anything of it. We ate, we laughed, people gave heartfelt toasts. My grandmother stood up, raised her glass, and looked directly at me. "To Anna," she said, her voice clear and strong. "A woman who knows the value of restoring things, who knows that sometimes you have to strip away all the ugly layers to find the true, beautiful thing underneath, and who had the wisdom to know what was worth saving and what was best left to rot." A few people looked confused by the strange toast, but they all cheered. I knew exactly what she meant. At 7:29 p.m., I caught Mark's eye across the room. He gave me a subtle nod. It was time. I picked up the remote control that had been sitting on our table. With a steady hand, I turned on the television and switched it to the local news channel. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a slideshow. It was David, the journalist, standing in front of a graphic that read, "The CEO's Shadow Ledger, a special investigation." A hush fell over the room. "Good evening," David began, his voice grave. "Tonight we bring you a story of staggering corporate greed and family betrayal, centered on one of this city's most prominent businessmen, Richard Miller." He used my father's full name. A picture of my father, smiling at a charity gala, filled the screen. "For years," David continued, "Richard Miller, founder of Miller Construction, has cultivated an image of success and integrity. But tonight we can reveal that this image is built on a foundation of lies, fraud, and theft." The screen cut to a shot of Chloe's party. It was a live feed from a news van parked across the street. Through the massive glass windows of the art museum, you could see the party in full swing. People in tuxedos and gowns, champagne flowing, a string quartet playing in the corner. And there, in the center of it all, was my father, my mother, and Chloe. Chloe was preening, holding a microphone, likely giving a speech about her own genius. My father stood beside her, beaming with pride. Back in our reception hall, my guests were utterly silent, their eyes glued to the screen. Then David started laying out the evidence. My documents, my spreadsheets, scanned copies of the fake invoices from Apex Development. He explained the scheme in simple, devastating terms. How my father had embezzled millions, how he had cheated on his taxes, how he had stolen from his partners. The screen showed an interview with a forensic accountant, my grandmother's contact, who confirmed the scale of the fraud. "The evidence is ironclad," the accountant said. "This is one of the most brazen cases of corporate fraud I've ever seen." Then the camera on the live feed zoomed in on my father. He was no longer beaming. Someone at the party must have been looking at their phone, must have seen a news alert. A whisper had started. You could see it on the screen. The subtle shift, a guest leaning in to whisper in another's ear. Someone else pulling out their phone. The party's atmosphere was changing. The festive mood was curdling. Then, my phone, which I had placed on the table, began to vibrate. It was a call from a cousin, one of the few family members I didn't despise, who'd been guilted into attending Chloe's party. I ignored it. Then another call. An aunt. Then a text. "OMG, Anna, are you seeing this?" The report continued. David now held up a photo of me. "The source for this investigation," he announced, "is a person who saw the corruption firsthand. The company's own bookkeeper, a woman with intimate knowledge of the fraud because she was ordered to process the payments and who had the courage to come forward. His own daughter, Anna Miller." The camera at Chloe's party was still focused on my father, and that's when his face began to crumble. The confusion, the dawning horror, the realization that the bookkeeper, the reliable, quiet girl he had dismissed his entire life, was the architect of his doom. My phone buzzed again. It was my cousin, calling again, frantic. This time, I answered, putting it on speaker for our table to hear. "Anna," she whispered, her voice panicked. "What is going on? Everyone is watching the news on their phones. Your dad. He looks like he's going to be sick. Chloe is screaming at him, asking what's happening." On the screen, we saw it play out. Chloe, her face a mask of rage and confusion, was indeed yelling at my father. My mother looked like she was about to faint. "And that's not all," David's voiceover boomed from the TV. "We have learned that as of 20 minutes ago, federal agents began executing search warrants at the headquarters of Miller Construction and at Richard Miller's private residence." "Oh my God," my cousin breathed into the phone. "Anna, the police are here. They're coming into the museum. They're walking right up to your dad." And on the television, for all the world to see, we saw it. Two men in dark suits, flanked by uniformed officers, approach my father. The celebrity DJ must have finally gotten the memo because the music screeched to a halt. A dead, horrified silence fell over the lavish party. One of the agents said something to my father. We couldn't hear the words, but we saw the result. My father's champagne glass slipped from his numb fingers and shattered on the polished floor. His face was white, utterly, completely defeated. The camera zoomed in on Chloe. Her perfect, influencer-ready face was contorted in a snarl of pure, impotent fury. Her career was over before it had even begun. Her launch party had become a crime scene. Then the news report cut back to the studio. A dramatic turn of events at what was meant to be a celebration, David said somberly. A story of corporate greed that has just become very, very public. We will bring you more as it develops. I turned off the television. Silence. The 50 guests at my wedding reception stared at me. Their faces were a mixture of shock, awe, and dawning comprehension. My grandmother was the first to break the silence. She raised her glass again. "Well," she said with immense satisfaction, "that was a better slideshow than I expected." The room erupted, not with applause, but with a buzz of excited, shocked chatter. Mark came to my side, wrapped his arm around my waist, and kissed my temple. "You did it," he whispered. I leaned into him, a wave of relief so profound it almost made my knees buckle. "No," I whispered back. "We did it." The aftermath was swift and brutal. Just as we had planned, the news of my father's arrest at his daughter's lavish party was the lead story everywhere for days. The optics were a public relations nightmare from which there was no recovery. The story of him skipping his other daughter's wedding for the party only added a delicious layer of schadenfreude for the public. His business partners, the ones he'd been stealing from, immediately filed a massive civil lawsuit. The federal case against him was airtight. With my evidence and the forensic accountant's testimony, he had no defense. They froze all his assets, including the offshore accounts we had helped them locate. The company, Miller Construction, collapsed into bankruptcy within a month. The Grand family home was seized and sold to cover a fraction of the debts and fines. My mother, stripped of her wealth and social standing, was forced to move into a small rented apartment. Her society friends, who had once flocked to her parties, now crossed the street to avoid her. And Chloe, poor precious Chloe, her brand became a laughingstock. Memes of her screaming face at the party went viral. Her celebrity friends and investors vanished overnight. Her wealthy fiancé, whose family valued reputation above all else, broke off the engagement via a curt text message. She was left with nothing but a mountain of debt for a party that had served as the backdrop for her family's implosion. Last I heard, from my cousin, she was working as a hostess at a chain restaurant, the ultimate humiliation for someone who believed she was destined for fame and fortune. They had lost everything: their money, their reputation, their future. They had tried to make my wedding day a symbol of my humiliation. Instead, it became the day of their reckoning. About a month after the wedding, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. It was my father. His voice was unrecognizable. The booming, arrogant tone was gone, replaced by a weak, reedy rasp. "Anna?" he said. "Yes," I replied, my voice cold and neutral. "Anna, I know you're angry," he began, the words stumbling out. "But you have to help me. They're going to send me to prison for years. You're my daughter. Family is supposed to help each other." The sheer, unmitigated gall of that statement left me speechless for a second. "Family?" I finally said, the word tasting like poison. "You skipped my wedding. You tried to ruin the most important day of my life for a party. You told me a wedding was just a party, and that Chloe's business was more important. You don't get to talk to me about family." "It was a mistake," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I was wrong. I see that now. Please, Anna, tell them it was a misunderstanding. You can fix this. You're good with the books. You can fix it." He still didn't get it. He still saw me as his functionary, the fixer, the reliable appliance. He didn't see a person he had wronged. He saw a tool he had lost control of. I took a deep breath. I thought about the years of being second best, of being invisible, of my dreams being dismissed as junk. I thought about the coldness in his eyes when he gave me that ultimatum. "You were right about one thing, Dad," I said, my voice as calm and clear as a winter morning. "What? What was I right about?" he asked, a pathetic flicker of hope in his voice. "It was a business decision," I said, and I hung up the phone. I blocked the number. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. I did not attend the sentencing. And now, 5 years later, I am here. My grandmother passed away peacefully 2 years ago, leaving me her house and a modest but comfortable inheritance. We sold her house, and my parents' seized home, ironically, was bought by a developer who tore it down to build something smaller and more tasteful. Mark and I used that money, along with the profits from my now thriving restoration business, to buy this place, an old, dilapidated Victorian mansion that had been left to rot. It was our masterpiece. Mark, with his love of history, researched its original architecture. I, with my love of detail, restored it. We spent 2 years bringing it back to life. We stripped the floors, rebuilt the porch, polished the brass, reglazed the windows. It's our home now, but it's also our business. The ground floor is my workshop and showroom where I restore and sell high-end antiques. I'm no longer just fixing junk. I'm a respected historical restoration expert. The upper floors are our living space. Mark is now the head of the history department at his school. He spends his weekends in the carriage house, which he has converted into a wood shop, building beautiful replica furniture based on historical designs. Our life is quiet and beautiful and built with our own hands. It is solid. It is real. I pick up the unopened letter from my father, the 5th one. I walk to the fireplace where a low fire is burning against the morning chill. I look at his handwriting. I feel nothing. No anger, no pain, just a profound, quiet emptiness where a father's love was supposed to be. He is a ghost from a life that no longer belongs to me, a story I have finished reading. My grandmother told me something once, long before all this happened. We were in her garden, and she was showing me how to prune her rose bushes. "Never let anyone else decide your worth, Anna," she had said, snipping away a dead branch. "People will always try to tell you what you are. They'll put you in a box, give you a label. You are the only one who gets to decide if it sticks." For years, I wore their labels. The reliable one, the quiet one, the second best one. I let them put me in a box, but they forgot one crucial thing about me. I know how to restore things. I know how to find the value in what others discard. And most importantly, I know how to break down a broken thing to its component parts, see exactly how it was built, and decide what is worth saving. My family was rotten from the inside out. There was nothing there worth restoring. So I tore it down to the foundation. I tossed the letter into the flames. I watched the paper curl, blacken, and turn to ash. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I don't think about them at all. The sun is higher in the sky now, and the room is filled with light. I can hear the sound of Mark's saw from the carriage house, a happy, industrious noise. It's time for more coffee. It's a beautiful day, the day of my 5th wedding anniversary. And I am happy, completely and utterly happy. That is the best revenge of all.